All right, let's just get right into it. Could the great Sir Don Bradman, the absolute pinnacle of batting, still average 100 in today's game? You know, it's probably one of the biggest what-ifs in all of sports, and we're going to try and unpack it.
99.94. I mean, come on. It's got to be the most iconic number in cricket, maybe even in any sport, right? For his entire 20-year Test career, Don Bradman was just 4 measly runs short of averaging a perfect 100. It's just wild.
And look, we're not just talking about a record here. This is a statistical anomaly. It's a number so completely off the charts, so far beyond what's even considered normal, that it basically puts Bradman in a category all by himself.
So that really is the big question, isn't it? If you could just pluck him out of his era with all that genius and drop him right into the modern game with its elite athletes, its crazy technology, and just relentless analysis, could he still do it? Would that magical number actually hold up?
Okay, so before we can even try to project him into the future, we really need to get our heads around just how ridiculously dominant he was back in his own time. Let's start by looking at the sheer scale of his stats.
I mean, just look at that gap. It's not even close. His average is nearly 40 runs higher than the next best. Think about that for a second. The gap between number 1 and number 2 is bigger than the gap between number 2 and number 56. That's just staggering.
And that's the key thing to understand. Bradman wasn't just a little bit better than everyone else. He was a true statistical outlier. He's a data point so far away from the pack that he basically breaks the whole chart. He's on a completely different planet, statistically speaking.
Okay, and if you thought that was wild, this is where it gets just completely nuts. Bradman's average was 9 standard deviations better than the average of the next 166 best batsmen of all time. For anyone who knows a little bit about stats, you'll know that's basically impossible. It's an event that just shouldn't happen, ever.
So you take that once-in-a-species talent, and you wonder, could he actually have done even better today? It sounds crazy, but let's look at the case for Bradman, the advantages he'd get from the modern game.
Okay, first up, the pitches. You got to remember, back in Bradman's day, a little rain could turn the pitch into an absolute minefield. Today, they're basically highways. Then there's the equipment. Modern bats are like tree trunks, and you know what? He'd be wearing a helmet, not risking life and limb against every bouncer. And on top of all that, there are more teams playing now, which means more chances to fill his boots against some of the weaker sides.
Right, and you see quotes like this from fans. Now, okay, that's obviously a bit of an exaggeration, but it gets the point across. This is a guy who averaged over 200 against South Africa in his day. So the logic is, you give him more chances against a wider range of teams, and that 99.94 might have actually gone up.
But hold on. The modern game isn't all flat pitches and super bats. No way. It's also a complete gauntlet of challenges that Bradman never, ever had to deal with. So let's flip the coin and look at the other side of the argument.
Let's be real. The game has totally changed. Cricket today is a massive global sport. The talent pool isn't a pond anymore, it's an ocean. The bowlers, they're bigger, faster, fitter, and they've got all sorts of new tricks, like reverse swing. Oh, and you've got DRS, so no more getting away with a dodgy LBW call. Throw in a completely grueling travel schedule with multiple formats, and yeah, it's a whole different beast.
And this might be the biggest difference of all, the data. Today, every single ball is tracked. Every little movement is analyzed. Coaches have terabytes of video. They have heat maps. They can find any tiny weakness and set a very specific trap for it. People talk about the Bodyline series.
Well, their analysis back then was basically watching a bit of old newsreel footage. In today's game, there would be absolutely nowhere for him to hide.
So there you have it. 2 really strong competing arguments, right? One side says the modern game helps him. The other says it would bring him crashing back down to earth. So let's try to weigh the evidence and see what the data tells us.
Now this is where things get really interesting. This chart basically complicates the whole "it was easier back then" argument. What you're looking at are the average batting scores decade by decade. And check this out. The 1930s, when Bradman was at his peak, and the 2000s, they were both really high-scoring eras. The global batting average was almost identical. So what does that tell us? It suggests that for all the changes, the fundamental battle between bat and ball might not have shifted as much as we think.
So to really compare apples to apples across different eras, analysts had this cool tool called the match factor. It's pretty simple, really. It doesn't just look at a player's average. It measures how much better they were than the average Joe playing at the exact same time. It's a way to measure pure, unfiltered dominance.
And when you look at the match factor, wow. This is where Bradman just leaves everyone in the dust.
His was 3.13. That means he was more than 3 times better than the typical player of his generation. And the modern greats, the legends of our time, even at their absolute blistering peak, they're not even in the same zip code. This is the hard data that proves that insane gap we saw earlier. Okay, so where does all of this leave us? After weighing all the pros and cons, what's the final verdict? Could the Don actually average 100 today?
Well, the debate really splits into 2 main camps. You've got the invincibility school. These are the folks who believe that with modern bats and those flat pitches, his genius would just explode. But then you've got the more common view, which we can call the regression to 75 school. They argue that all the forces of the modern game, the deep analysis, the huge talent pool, the defensive tactics, they would inevitably have to bring that number down.
And that second view, it's one you hear from a lot of former players. Take this quote from Rodney Hogg, a former Aussie fast bowler. He's pretty blunt about it. He basically says, look, Bradman was an absolute freak, but averaging pretty much 100 in this era? No way. Just not possible.
So, if not 99.94, then what would it be? Well, the general consensus when you talk to analysts and experts seems to land somewhere in the range of 75 to 85.
But here's the thing, and this is maybe the most important takeaway. An average of 75 or 85 would still make him the greatest batsman of the modern era, and it wouldn't even be close. He'd still be a good 15 to 25 runs ahead of anybody else. His status as the sport's greatest statistical outlier, totally safe. The magic number would just be a different number.
And that kind of leaves us with one final big question to think about. When we talk about greatness, is it really about hitting a specific, absolute number? Or is the true measure of greatness that unbridgeable, unbelievable gap you create between yourself and everybody else?